Welcome back to the Roadside Rescue YouTube channel. I'm Ernest and I'm a mobile mechanic. You can see here's my truck. I've got two. One's a Ford Ranger that I've been using while I'm waiting on a new engine for this one. And we're going to talk today about tire inflators. Especially as a mobile mechanic, there's a lot of times where I got to get a call out to help somebody off the side of the road and they got a flat tire. It happens more than, I plan on it happening. I try not to utilize that as a service of my business because, a tow truck and tire company is better suited to help you. But occasionally I'll stop just because somebody's on the side of the road and, use my impact to get their tires off for them real quick so they don't have to fight there, with over-torqued lug nuts that the tire shop put on. And a lot of times I end up giving people air. So I have a big tool I use to do that. It's a Milwaukee M18 air compressor. It's 3 gallons and it'll fill up the tires on anything. You can see on my big truck here, these tires will go to 70 PSI. I've got dualies in the back that go to 85 PSI, and a small air compressor just isn't gonna cut it. As well as being able to do it quickly, that's why I invested in this Milwaukee air compressor, which I bought myself. This isn't sponsored by any of these companies I'm gonna talk about. Well, that may not be necessary for you, but you definitely want something to give yourself air, especially in an emergency. Just the other day, I filmed a short where I helped my brother out at a gas station because he went over there and put some quarters in a machine to fill up his tire, and the machine didn't work. Well, that's far too common. It's best if you have something to help yourself out and you're not dependent on others. Here's a caveat for the beginning of the video though. You probably should know how to use a tire plug kit or be willing to, change a spare tire, because if you got a nail in your tire, you may be able to fill it up with your little air compressor and then drive 5 blocks to the nearest tire shop. But if you're out in the middle of nowhere and you don't have a plug kit, filling it up for every 2 minutes it goes low isn't gonna cut it. So maybe look at how to use a tire plug kit and have this little compressor to help you out, or be willing to change it into your spare tire and get into town if that's what you need. But the most commonly overlooked preparation item on a vehicle is the spare tire air pressure. I can't tell you how many times I've helped somebody out because they were stuck on the side of the road because they put their spare tire on, but it didn't have any air either. So having a little air compressor can definitely help. We're gonna talk about the benefits, the advantages, and the pros and cons of each type of air compressor and the different kinds that there are. Obviously, you don't need a $400 air compressor that's battery powered, if you just have a small little SUV or car. In fact, this is the air compressor I pulled out of my wife's car. I keep it in there for her. Maybe you're a shop or somebody like me who wants to do things seriously. Or maybe you have a constant low tire pressure issue going on in your fleet of vehicles and you need something that's just a little bit more consistent. Well, there's different options and we'll talk about those. All right, to get started off, we're gonna talk about my favorite compressors, the different kinds, again, the pros and cons, and there's a link to each one in the description down below, as well as that list of pros and cons so you can go back and remind yourself without having to listen to my voice. First off, we have jump box chargers. Here's what they look like. I've got my list here. I'm just gonna read it to you so I don't miss any points because these are important. The cons are, they're usually heavy. They're kind of those old-fashioned kind of things. And the air pump part of them, that's actually almost an afterthought. Their main point is to be a jump box. But that's not a bad option because I have a jump box in my wife's car as well. I like her to have both. They are heavy, their air pumps are pretty small, and their parts are pretty weak. Sometimes those pistons are made out of plastic, again, because the main focus of that product is the jump box itself. The air pump on those, the box needs to be charged, so it's not foolproof. If you have one sitting in your car for 2 years and you think, hey, I've got it in there, but then all of a sudden emergency happens, maybe it's out of battery, so you need to make sure it's charged. It's not worry-free. They'll also overheat, so if you're trying to fill up all the tires on your vehicle for some reason, you probably can't do it in one go. A lot of these little air compressors, you have to run for a couple minutes and let them cool down for 10 or 15 minutes before you can try again. But the pros are, like I said, they are multi-purpose. They are a jump box and an air compressor. They usually have lights built into them as well. All these products are going to have gauges, especially nowadays. They're not going to make an air compressor that doesn't have a gauge built in. So all of these that I talk about are going to have gauges, and every one in the description is going to have a gauge. Another pro is if you have it charged up, it's a ready to go unit. You can just take it out with you, bring it over to each tire, and the hose can be pretty short on those. All right, the next kind we're going to talk about, it's handheld and it's battery powered. Here's what it looks like. The cons are they have weak internals. They'll have plastic parts or weak parts as well, so you can't count on using it every day or for a big fleet of vehicles. It's just kind of one of those things you got to use every now and then in case of an emergency. It's got a limited PSI range. It wouldn't be able to fill up the tires on this truck, almost size and PSI. It'll overheat if it's too big, but there's no way it could get something this big and that high pressure up to pressure. These are going to overheat quickly as well, so you're just really going to be able to top one off in an emergency or before you go to work in the morning. If you don't have time to go to the tire shop right then and there, if it's just halfway flat or something like that. In fact, my old Nissan pickup truck I had, I guess if I parked it on just the right exact spot, about once a month, it would just be randomly flat if I left it sitting there for about 5 minutes. But every other time I parked it, it would be perfectly fine. So I'd just fill it up, it'd be good for a month, and then all of a sudden it would be completely flat, not even halfway flat. So that would be a good case for one of these. The pros are it's got its own battery, so it's ready to go. You can take it to each tire as well. You don't have to worry about cord length. As long as it's charged, it's cheap and hassle-free. And as long as you've got enough battery, it's got an unlimited air supply and enough time to wait around for it to cool down. Now, I'm speaking about all these air compressors from experience. I only have 2 in my possession at this point, but I've used every single kind of these that I'm talking about in my life, and several times. Now, this is a plug-in kind. It's 12 volts, and this is kind of have for my wife. That way she doesn't have to worry about it being charged or anything like that. She can just have it in the back of her car and ready to go. The cons of this one are the fact that it's not quite so portable. You have to have it with your vehicle. It's not for daily use as either. It needs a power source, so your vehicle needs to be running or have a charged battery. In fact, I wouldn't recommend running it while the vehicle's turned off. I would have the vehicle running to make sure that you don't drain the battery enough that it can't get started again. This one, I believe, has some really weak internals, so you wouldn't want to use it all the time. I know some of these have plastic pistons. I'm not going to say that about this one particularly because I don't know. Slime's a pretty good brand, but this is the one I have in my wife's car. It's just for emergencies. The other thing you need to make sure of, if you get one of these, that it has a long enough cord to reach every tire from your plug-in. If you have one plug-in at the front of your car, you got a big long truck or car or something like that, maybe a limousine, and you think this is good enough, well, you may go to plug it in and find out that it only reaches halfway down your car. So make sure before you put this in your car for emergencies that it can reach every single tire, since it has to be connected to a power source. Otherwise, you're going to have to jack the car up and take the tire off and bring it up to the front of the car just to fill it up with air, and that makes no sense. These are going to overheat as well, but as long as you have time to wait and something that's giving you enough power, this has an unlimited air supply. This one has a light built into it as well. Like I said, they all have gauges, so this one's a pretty good option. All right, next we're going to talk about that compressor's bigger brother. It's got some advantages, also some things you should be aware of if you're considering buying it. This is what it looks like. Now, the cons of this one are it's not going to be quite so portable. They're a bit bigger and a bit heavier. But, you know, if you have a Jeep or something or a big trunk and you want to have, you know, one of the pros as well is it gets up to a lot higher air pressure, like 150 PSI. Probably doesn't overheat as much either the way they're constructed. And that'd be a good option for something like this truck if I wanted to plug in. The internals are going to be a bit stronger. And one of the best things about these is it's worry-free. Plug in and go. As long as you've got a power supply, your vehicle's running again. I wouldn't do it while the vehicle's turned off. Make sure it stays running. As long as it's running, you've got an unlimited air supply. Again, one of the cons is it's not quite so portable. I wouldn't get one of these for daily use if you had a shop or something like that. It'd probably just be a little bit too much for it. It's one of those things like you can use it a bit more than these smaller ones for a bit more pressure as well, but I wouldn't count on using it every day, all day if it was your line of work or something like that. But maybe it would, I just wouldn't do it. One of my favorite memories trying to fill up a tire that had gone flat was with a hand pump. Now, there's stuff that's a little bit better than a hand pump. A dual piston foot pump will get a little bit more quantity of air in there. It won't get such high pressures. Here's what they look like. When I was younger, we had a 98 GMC Suburban, and that thing had some big old tires and it was heavy. And it went flat one day and I told my mom, hey, don't worry, I'll take care of it. And I took my bicycle pump out there and I couldn't take care of it. It was just too much for me to pump. The cons of that, it's backbreaking, it's physical labor. It's only realistic for small tires. You know, it can get up to a lot of pressure, but there's no way you can put the quantity of air in there needed to build it up to that pressure. Realistically, I mean, if you had the amount of energy to do it and willpower, certainly you could, but it wasn't something I had. I was a little bit younger though. But the biggest con has to be the amount of work you got to put into it to get the tire up to pressure. There's better options, especially because one of those small pumps like that is about cheaper than one of these pumps nowadays anyways. But hey, it's got some pros. Unlimited air. As long as you have the energy to keep pumping it, you can pump out air for the rest of your life. They're going to have great internals. These things are meant to be used, you know, by bicycle shops and just used and used. So the internals are great. They're all metal and they're not going to wear out or overheat because you can't put that amount of energy into them. Right, change of scenery. That sun's burning me up out there. I forgot I actually used to film a lot of videos sitting right here. Well, not a lot, but there was a few videos I filmed sitting in the seat, and I haven't used this truck in so long. I forgot about that. Your next option is going to be a battery-powered air compressor, but it's not handheld. It's a little bit bigger. It looks like this. Now, I was so close to getting one of those air compressors because I only fill up tires occasionally, maybe once every week or 2 weeks. So I'm never overheating my air compressors, but my concern was it wasn't going to be able to handle this truck. 70 PSI in the front, 85 PSI in the back on dualies, big tires. That thing was going to overheat. They're good for filling up one tire, even a big truck tire up to almost that much pressure, 60 PSI or so. But then they've got to rest for about 15 minutes. And that wasn't something that I wanted to have to deal with. That's why I went with this bigger one. But hey, this may be the best option, and this is one of my favorites. It's battery powered, so it's got all the pros and cons of the other battery powered ones. It's a little bit bigger than that handheld Ryobi one we were talking about, but it'll pump out a little bit more pressure. The internals are a little bit stronger. It'll still overheat, and it still may wear out if you use it super consistently every day. So probably one of those borderline emergency, well, you know, I like to work on go-karts or rebuild cars in my garage, or I've got 15 cars sitting out in the field that I work on every now and then, kind of tools. It may not be for everybody to throw in your trunk because you got to make sure that battery's charged, but it's a good option if you don't want to buy a big old air compressor. The full list of pros and cons are in the description down below. Now here's the one I've got. It's the M18 Milwaukee air compressor. You can probably find one by different brands, but all my tools are Milwaukee. I'm not sponsored. They didn't give me anything. I bought all my own tools. But this was the route for me to go. This thing can get a ton of air pressure. Plus, being a mobile mechanic, I like to spray areas clean when I'm working on them. So this works as an air compressor in that way. It's not big enough to run like an impact gun if you were changing tires or something like that. I just don't think it could keep up with that quantity of air you'd be using. But light use like that, where you're spraying stuff clean, filling up tires, this thing's perfect for me. It's got a built-in gauge, goes up to 120 PSI, and one battery will for sure fill up all these truck tires on this thing from empty. It'd probably fill up about 20 or 25 small car tires. Plus, you can take the battery out, recharge it, have two batteries with you like I do. I have one in my bucket with my hose. If one goes dead, I'll just slap the next one in there while the other one's charging, and it'll charge up pretty much by the time I could use the next battery up for sure. Here's what it looks like. Its cons are it's heavy, it's large, it's not easy to carry around. I mean, this thing, it's sitting right here. That's about all I can do to pick it up and put it in the seat right here, you know. I could pick up something a little bit heavier, but it's pretty heavy. This is nice steel, probably aluminum right here, but everything on this, just heavy duty. It's not going to break down. It's not going to overheat. I've been running this thing consistently for a few hours on end. A lot of people use these for roofing. I know that when they just have to get up there and you don't have to run that air gun super consistently while you set stuff up. This works real well for those guys, and it works well for me in my situation. If you're considering becoming a mobile mechanic or mobile tire changer, this is definitely the tool you want because it's portable. It's light enough to carry around. I mean, it's heavy to pick up, but it's not like a big air compressor, and you don't want to have a big old air compressor strapped on the back of your truck when this can do just as much. And when you're on the road, there's no way you need that much air. All right, last but not least, we got the classic pancake air compressor. This is what you'll see. Well, you're not gonna see them, but this is what they have inside those little kiosks at the gas station where you gotta put quarters in to get air for your tire. It's one of these things. When you put it in, that power comes on and that air compressor pumps up. It's one of these small pancake compressors. This is what it looks like. You can either get that or you can get one that looks real similar to mine like this. That one's a little bit bigger. They're pretty similar in price. Sometimes those pancake ones are 1.5 gallons. These ones are typically about 3 gallons, but you can get 3 to 5 gallon pancake compressors as well. There are some cons to these. You need a 110 volt power supply. It has to be plugged into a normal outlet. And beware, once you charge an air compressor like this, it doesn't mean that air is going to stay in there forever. It can leak down, so don't just charge it up, throw it in the back of your truck and think you're good, because you may need it 2 months later. It may be out of air because it just leaks down so slowly. So make sure when it's ready to go that it's fully charged. You can charge them up and take them on site, but if it's not enough to fill up one tire, then you're gonna have to go back to the power source and plug it back in. It's got some pros though. It's under half the price of my Milwaukee M18 air compressor. So if you have a power supply built into your truck or something like that, that's probably the option for you. These things are for long-term use, just like this M18. They're built to just run all day long, strong internal components. They're not gonna break down, and they'll probably have pretty good warranties accordingly. These things are gonna put out high PSI numbers, and it's going to last a long time. So if you've got a power source that's consistent, you can use, you know, if you're going mobile or something like that, definitely check into this option. If not, you're someone like me. In my Ranger, I don't, and here I do, so I could have got the other one, but I wanted this Milwaukee one because I had a bunch of the batteries, and in my Ranger, I don't have a power supply, so that was the way for me to go. Again, you can get something bigger as well. There's other options, but these are the ones I'm very familiar with, and this covers most everything you'd need to consider. You get a big old one, put it on the back of your truck, man, you'd have to be doing semi-tires. It doesn't make sense to me. Even this small one could fill up a semi-tire in a couple of minutes. It wouldn't even be worth it then to me. I hope that video helps somebody out. It's definitely worth it to keep an air compressor in your car because, like I said, with my brother 2 days ago, I got a call out early in the morning to help him at a gas station because even though he counted on the gas station having air, it didn't work. You want to be independent. You don't want to be waiting on somebody else to fill up your tire with air, hoping you change a spare. If you can, learn how to use a plug kit, fill up your tire with air, and get yourself to a tire shop when you can. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. Consider subscribing to support the channel, and that's a job well done.